Welcome to the third part of our Learning Strategies video series, Taking Notes. Once again, we're referring back to Sandra McGuire's list of 10 metacognitive strategies. This video will focus on both taking notes in class and on using those notes to actively study after class. So you've helped your student map out the semester, they've done the reading, they've taken reflective notes while doing it, now they're ready for the second phase of the study cycle. It's really tempting to a student to try to convince themselves that they've gotten everything they needed out of the book. I mean, surely you don't have to read and go to class too. Well, yes you do. As educators know, that's because the instructor's lecture will undoubtedly provide a deeper understanding of the concepts involved and will most likely draw attention to certain areas or concepts that the student didn't realize were quite as important. I also remind my students that their course grades will almost definitely be affected by attendance and active participation in any activities or discussions that are held in class. So make sure you have a pen and a piece of paper handy before moving forward with this video. You can pause it now if you need to. Taking good notes is important, but often students don't really understand what makes for good notes. I will usually show a student these questions and ask them to spend a few moments thinking about them and then jot down a few words in response to each. A lot of students report having troubles with note taking because they're trying to write down everything the instructor says. Right now, using that pen and paper you got earlier, create your own lecture note on the concept of symbolic interactionism. Try to get your definition down quickly. Don't pause the video, but use the time allotted. Okay, now I'd like for you to read through this slide with me while you listen to me describe anticipatory socialization. When my daughter was small, I often allowed her to pick out her own clothing. Sometimes I'd make suggestions, but for the most part, I just let her express herself however she wanted. However, once she started getting close to kindergarten age, we started talking about what clothing would be appropriate for going to school. Socks should match one another. Colors should be complementary. Costumes and pajamas were not allowed. So we started talking about these things before she was ready to start school because I knew very shortly she'd be expected to conform to these social norms. This is a great example of anticipatory socialization. Now make your own quick definition of anticipatory socialization. Yay, pop quiz, my favorite, said no one ever. Let's see if you can explain the first concept out loud, as if to a friend or to a classmate. Now try the second concept. I'm willing to bet you have a much better understanding of the second concept than the first. Why? Well, because the second concept was framed in a real-world example for you. It was framed in context. It was presented as a situation that you could picture yourself in, making it immediately relevant. So what's the takeaway here? Just that an example is much more useful to us than a textbook definition, especially when it comes to learning and understanding concepts. Students need to learn how to create this relevancy in their courses, even those that they're less interested in, to make better use of their notes and time spent studying. Yes, showing up is more than half the battle, but it's not the whole battle, right? Students need to understand they have to be doing more than just occupying space in the room. Rather, help them learn to think of attendance and participation as active things, not passive. Students can actively contribute to the conversation using the reflective notes from the reading. We know instructors will notice, and in a positive way. Remind your students, this isn't high school where it's just not cool to be engaged in your learning. They're paying for this experience and should expect to get their money's worth. I tell my students to come into class with at least 2 smart things they can say or ask based on the lecture content. So now let's talk a little bit more about what students should be doing with those reflective notes they're taking from the reading and the lecture notes that they took in class. Again, let's prepare your student to push back against your recommendation. Optimally, a student who has been following our study cycle so far has done the reading, has taken notes from the reading into class, and added to those notes during the lecture, taking note of what the instructor emphasizes. It's important to stress here that fill-in-the-blank notes, sometimes offered by instructors, just aren't nearly as effective. They can inform a well-made study guide, but printing out the instructor's PowerPoint slides can be helpful for guidance. Not nearly as effective, however, as taking notes by hand. At this point in the coursework cycle, students have done the reading and added to their notes from the class lecture. Now the student needs to find something to do with those notes to study actively. Reteach. Learning material well enough that you can teach it to someone else is so much better than learning just enough to pass the exam. Why? Because you need to actually be able to anticipate questions that could come up and know how to explain the answers. Explain them, not just recite them. Reorganizing notes to combine reading and lecture material, creating an outline or concept map, making question charts or flashcards, creating and using Quizlets are all great hands-on note studying activities. Looking back to the concept of the study cycle, it's important to remember these activities are taking place on a regular basis as the student moves through the semester. These aren't things to do just in the 2 to 3 days leading up to the exam, but continuously, with new material added after each class lecture. I hope you got a lot out of this video. In the last video for this series, in part 4, we're going to be talking about the assessment phase of the cycle and how students can use these strategies to accurately gauge which parts of the content need more work and attention.